good evening. My name is Matthew Schott. As the chair of IDSA at L. Lawrence Technological University, I would like to introduce tonight's guest speaker, Russel Cluff. Russ, take it away.
All right. Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Usually I'm the one who's hosting events like this, and so it's kind of interesting to be on the other end of it, but I'm excited to share a little bit about myself, about the stuff that I've been doing, a little bit about my career, and answer some questions that you guys might have as you're starting off your journey in industrial design. So, I've put together a little deck for us. If you have questions, feel free to raise your hand and whatnot, and I'll gladly pause. But um, so, like you said, my name is Russ Cluff. I am the owner of the Variable Design Podcast, the host of the Variable Design Podcast, and I do business when I freelance and do consulting work under the name of The Variable. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But just to give you guys a little bit of context about me, when I graduated from university, I wouldn't say that I was, at any stretch of the imagination, your stereotypical undergraduate industrial designer, because that pixelated, super old image that was taken with somebody's, it wasn't a flip phone. I'm not that old, but an old phone. That's my family when I graduated. So I had two kids by the time I was finishing. And so my opportunity to spend unlimited amount of hours in the shop, doing some of the things that some of the single younger guys were able to do just wasn't possible. So just setting the stage for you, letting you know that if for some reason, I guess I share that for context, so that if you for any reason at all feel like you're somehow disadvantaged or you don't fit a specific mold, I think an underlying theme of my presentation and my story as a creative industrial designer is that there's a place for you and you're needed in our industry. So that's the size of my family now. I have four young boys and they're growing like weeds. I'm a proud dad, so of course I'm going to have to take every opportunity to show them off, especially that cute little guy right there in the front. That's my little writer. Anyhow, so I mentioned that I wasn't like everybody else able to go off and do internships out of state at prestigious studios and so forth. My in with creative design was doing graphics while my peers were going off and doing that. I had to stay home, take care of kids, and I started off working at a t-shirt printing company, making vector graphics, taking people's pixelated Pinterest photos and saying, can you please put this on a shirt so we can go to Disneyland and be matchy matchy? That was all I did while I was going through school. And what seemed at the time as a disadvantage has actually panned out to be a super strength in the long run. After working at a t-shirt firm, the t-shirt printing company, I worked at a media company, Law Search Media, helping them with content creation for marketing, for their advertising, for their respective clients. And that's when all of that time in Adobe Illustrator making vector versions of cruddy stuff started to seem to pay off. And eventually I was making all kinds of content for various campaigns, and especially infographics. This was the one thing that I kept doing over and over and over again. And that ultimately led me to getting my foot in the door at a medical development firm. And I mention that because, sorry, it's still set to do that funky transition for my live podcast. when I was doing all of those graphics and stuff, especially infographics, social media posts and content, I reached out to the CEO of this medical development company called Kablooey Design in the Twin Cities, Minnesota, and he liked my work. And I had paid attention and realized that recently he had made a post online sharing an infographic. And I tried to, in the most polite way possible, it's just never a good idea to reach out to somebody and say, hey, you know that infographic that you shared about your company for everybody else? That looked like dog crap. I'm really good at that kind of stuff. Here, you should have me work for you, and I can do ID and some of the graphic stuff for you as well. So I chose my words very carefully and simply said, hey, I noticed that you do infographics as well. We had talked earlier and I shared my industrial design portfolio. I didn't know if it was relevant to share, but here's my graphics portfolio as well. And you'll see a number of infographic examples in there. Suddenly, the crutch of having to work at a printing company and work making social media posts gave me a competitive advantage and was the foot that I needed to get in the door of this med tech development firm. And it was an awesome experience. I loved it. This product right here is a cassette that I designed and is patented and just went public. They aren't utilizing, they're actually, funny, you might patent something, but they might not actually go forward with manufacturing and using it. But it was part of a whole integral system, a surgical tool for, it's a handle, and this is a cassette. And essentially they're taking this distal tip of the tool, inserting it into that channel. And rather than, this is, I know you don't have very much reference for scale, but this is super teeny. And as a surgeon with gloves on, trying to thread that little anchor to suture it through would be super complex. And so we developed a whole system. The profile of that opening only works one way, so you can't accidentally go and do it the wrong way. And the way the tip just slides through the cassette, it snaps off the anchor and it's preloaded. So we designed and I helped develop that system. This is another example of what I did when I was working in medtech. This is an at-home strep test kit so that you don't, for parents, they particularly understand having a young child who's feeling sick, just to go to the doctor and have them swab their throat and say, oh, it's just viral. It's not actually strep. Sorry, you just have to sleep it off, is like infuriating. And so having the CEO of this company is developing an at-home strep test kit so you can avoid having to go to the doctor's office at all. And if you take the test and you see, oh, it's not strep, okay, then you just have to sleep it off, buddy. There's nothing that we can do. But if it is strep, then you need the antibiotic. That was a fun project. And here's that same cassette. Coloplast was the company. We helped design their overall ergonomic hand grip for their handle, and it was a lot of fun. So here's another example of a more recent project that I did for Scotch. This blister pack, they needed somebody who could quickly rapid prototype it and had familiar with laser cutting, and I had done it in school. And so I got assigned to the project and I prototyped all of those blister packs and helped mock them up. In Minnesota is where the headquarters are for Target headquarters. And so they chose a random store and we put all of our prototypes as if they mock it up and they put it on in a section on the wall to see how it does. And so that was a lot of fun making those prototypes. And along my journey, I happened to kickstart a game. I think one of the themes that if I were going to give advice to people is to just say yes more. In terms of like, started off doing shirts, graphics, and then said yes to med tech. I didn't think I was going to work in medical design ever. I thought I was going to make kids products and I thought I was going to make toys and games. That didn't pan out. And eventually I had this game that I developed amongst friends and I put it on Kickstarter, and we barely funded by the skin of our teeth. So if you have questions about crowdfunding and what my experience was like doing that, that's why I brought it up. If you guys are thinking about it, I'm happy to share my insights on what my experience was like. But we barely funded, and now I think I've got like 200 decks of this game sitting in my garage. Not because it was a total dud. It was an eye-opening experience that even though you have a fantastic product that everybody seems to like, marketing and getting the word out and it is a huge element, a big variable in the overall success over whether a product can go to fruition or not. So keep that in mind as you guys move forward. Okay. So I mentioned that I did the variable design and all this stuff. What the heck possessed me to even get in that? I was working in med tech. I had developed and done my own Kickstarter thing. In a number of respects, people would say that was a total success and you were doing great on that track. Why on earth did you even start a podcast? Well, it just so happens that I was going through all of that stuff. And the day before Thanksgiving, a few years back, the boss said, hey, it's been rough and I'm so sorry, but we have to cut you loose. And you're just like, you're kidding, right? right before Thanksgiving, yeah, there's no good time to cut anybody loose. So we're just going to rip it off like a Band-Aid. Like, oh, okay. So the next day, I thought to myself, well, how can I solve this problem? How can I be creative and innovative by my approach to touching base with new clients and somehow working for myself? And the conclusion that I came up with is I need to connect with people. And I share this with you guys so that you can use it to your advantage. There's power for some reason when you reach out to somebody and you say, hey, I'd like to sit down and talk with you for about 45 minutes about design, just to pick your brain and get to know you. Most people are pretty nice. There's something different about saying that versus, hey, I'm starting a design podcast and we're featuring some of the top studios in the area. And I'd love to just sit down and talk with you about design for an hour and get to know you and have you featured on our show. Are you willing to do that? Suddenly they're flattered and they're getting more than a cup of coffee out of the deal. They're getting some positive, hopefully positive exposure on your channel. And that was just it was like a snowball effect in the sense that by me just starting to connect with people, talking with them, invite them and feature them on my show, that started to put my name on the map in a surreal way. So much so that I remember there's the By Design series that's was it CBS? I can't remember. We just had Steve Cozolino, who's one of the judges on the show. The very first judge that I ever had come on the Variable podcast was Scott Henderson. And I remember when I reached out to him, I was like, crap my pants nervous to talk with him because I don't know, he's a famous designer and I'm just some dude who's living in the middle of nowhere in Minnesota. And I talked with him and told him I'd like him to be on my show. And he was over the moon. He said, yeah, heck yeah, I want to be on your show. And it was a blast. And suddenly anybody that I wanted to come on my show, I could ask. And they would say yes because Scott said yes. And then because Scott said yes, then Spencer Nugent said yes. And then Michael DeTulo said yes. And slowly but surely, people told me, hey, Russ, you know that you're like now known in the ID community. I'm like, what? Point simply being, as you guys make efforts to connect with people, our pool of connections is a lot smaller than you think. So that's a double-edged sword. If you give somebody a bad impression, it doesn't take long for it to make its way around. You're able to make good impressions. That can feed the machine in terms of you do a good job with this person, well, they talk, and the next person, you'll find it'll be just marginally easier to win that next client because you've established that rapport with them. And by simply connecting with people, having them be on my show and putting myself on their radar saying, hey, by the way, this isn't how I pay my bills. I freelance as an industrial designer. If you ever need anything, I'd be more than happy to help. And for just for kicks and giggles, I thought it would be fun to show you now what I offer as part of whenever I have services that I'm doing for clients. Another big thing as a byproduct of working in graphic design, motion graphics and animation and so forth has become doing 3D animation. And that's just another tool that at the time when I was kicking myself at the beginning, man, I wish I could do a real ID job. Instead, I'm sitting here making motion graphics for animations and whatnot, for political ads, for everything. And now it's paid for itself 10 times over. Here, I'll show you my fun little demo that I got here. Go. So, just to wrap things up, I shared my whole spattering of random stories and discombobulated thoughts. Really, what I'm driving at is I think that there's one secret sauce on my show. When I have guests come on for my podcast, I'll always ask them, "What is your variable?" What because nobody sucks on purpose. Okay, nobody purposely doesn't want to do a good job. It takes people connections to tell them, hey, I know you're really fond of Comic Sans and all of your presentations, but low key, just got to tell you, man, don't do that again. Oh, and now you know. So I call those little learning moments variables, unknowns that become clear to us either because of a mentor or somebody sharing wisdom with us or because of experience. Um, So my variable that I think is largely attributed to me becoming who I am, and I'm still a work in progress, um, for sure. But a large part of who I am is due to the fact that connect with people. People is the secret getting where you want to be. Whatever kind of specific designer you want to achieve, or whatever path you're aiming towards, people are going to get you there. And so that's my one takeaway for all of you guys is to definitely take every opportunity that you can to to meet with people, talk with people, and use any and every single learning opportunity that you've got to your advantage. And what might seem like a crutch at the beginning, where I felt like, man, I can't get a good ID job, um, turned out in the long run to be the one thing that set me apart, being the person that they needed for that. In every single job pretty much that I've gotten has because I knew the people who were hiring, and they said Russ is more than just a stereotypical industrial designer. He does this too. So diversify your offering and put it out there, and put as much effort into promoting yourself as you do in beautifying your projects. Um, and yeah, so that's my presentation. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to talk more about my background. Any questions you have about what I do now? Yeah.
Thanks a ton for that, Russ. You were definitely
Yeah.
going to open the floor now. So if anyone would like to ask something, yeah.
Okay, I have a question. So, is there like a project that you really favored, like working on, or I guess collaborating on, even?
Sure. In terms of like when I was in school or recently?
Uh, Whatever your favorite was. Yeah, I don't know.
That's a great question. So I've worked on, I wish that I could show it. I'm particularly proud of a recent project that I worked on while doing stuff in med tech. An abdominal surgeon was coming up with a device that they wanted to make it so by implanting this into a patient who had just had abdominal surgery, it would cut their recovery time down significantly. Because after you've been opened up for a dramatic procedure, your insides are swollen, and by putting your insides under negative pressure, so put some suction on it, um, it helps for everything to start working again, because you want all of your insides to work quickly after you have a procedure. So their deliverables were super stringent because they were working off of a comparable existing device, and they wanted something that could be, ultimately they wanted to implant this thing and to have it put your your stomach cavity under suction and be able to be removed through an opening about this size on the side. And it's, think of it like foam with two layers of, like, think of like shoving a foam finger from a game into a camelback bladder, and that lives in your stomach, and somehow that has to collapse down and be removed. And I just I'm particularly proud of that project because I came up with a solution that I wish I could just hold up a drawing and say, this is what it ended up looking like. What they came up with looked like a fan. And when you try and take all the fingers of a fan and pull it through a very tiny hole, it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we did so many tests, and the smallest that we could possibly get was still a hole this big. And I just randomly said, well, what if instead it's like branches? And so by the time this branch closes, that's when you get another offshoot. And it was funny because we were putting together a presentation deck, and I remember one of my coworkers said to me, Russ, the client's dead set on this design direction. I wouldn't even fart around with it. And I said, I think that this makes sense. I'll just put a loose sketch on the bottom corner of a presentation and just mention it. And now I showed it to the client and they went, oh, that makes sense. Have you tested it? And I'm like, well, yeah, we did a bench study and we were able to get it and do the removal, and it's well within the parameters that you need. In fact, it's better than the parameters that you set. And they said, oh my gosh, it looks like a leaf with the little thing shooting off of it. And I'm like, well, yeah. And they thought that that was just for an aesthetic thing. And I was like, no, that's purely functional. And they rebranded their entire company to have that profile. So if you guys look up Coloplast is the name of the company, their logo for their company has the same profile for the thing that I randomly sketched up and that we eventually prototyped, and all the bench studies worked, and now they've patented it. And so my small contribution, what was a dirty little sketch that I put in the corner of a single slide, ended up changing the course of the entire company. Now they're going through FDA clearance and they're well on track to get it. And it's just good knowing that that small contribution now will make a significant difference in the recovery time of abdominal surgery patients. So, I mean, it's not sexy. It's not this cool speaker that I designed for Apple. I don't know. Everybody seems to think that, oh, this is what good design looks like. But there are so many functional, necessary things that need equal attention, and medical is an excellent field. And so that's a really rewarding one, knowing that I had that much impact, and it directly correlates to the end user.
Well, thank you. That was very informative. I have one more question. Um, when you
What's your name, by the way?
Oh, my name is Jake. I'm a
Jake.
soft.
Okay. Awesome.
So one more question with a segue, I guess, into a partial question. So when you design, is it mostly sketching and online like rendering, or do you also work hands-on with like wood or concrete or anything?
This is an excellent question. We had that was a question that we asked on a recent. I can't remember the guest who was coming on, and we had a number of different people who were on the show, and we asked, do you work with your hands in the shop, or do you just sketch? And the conclusion that we got amongst our us as a bunch of professional designers was depends where you go, depends the culture of the company. My experience has been with a lot of consultancies and smaller firms. They still do it. Of course, you're going to find those. There are places where we specialize in doing sketch mock-ups, and we'll do that all day, every day in your CAD jockey, and you just go in the back in SolidWorks or whatever software, and you make stuff there. But in terms of the projects that I've done, I think it's kind of a mix of both. I personally love getting my hands dirty and going in the back and mocking stuff up in the shop. And the firm that I worked at prioritized targeting those kinds of clients. And so I got to do a lot of that. But I can't speak necessarily for all of them. If you work for a big brand, I know like OXO Good Grips, they do a ton of stuff like that where they're making up little handles, and they'll do a lot of it. But other places it might be more streamlined, and they're more on the ideation side of it, and they're like, our job is just to crank out ideas and get them back to them for either IP or for so for intellectual property, so that they can submit some kind of preliminary patent or whatever. Anyhow, so I feel like I didn't really answer your question. It depends, but I do think that studios definitely value thinking with your hands. And so I wouldn't by any stretch of the imagination purposefully lean one way or the other in terms of like, oh, I just cut out all of my quick dirty pink foam or urethane foam models from my portfolio. Nah, show all that stuff. Show it, because you're gonna, if that's, I guess that's probably my best advice. If you feel like you like doing a certain thing and you want to showcase it, you want to work at a studio where that fits. Does that make sense? Quick anecdote. I did animation and all this stuff. And one point I had a friend, I was post-graduation struggling to get my first ID gig. It's tough. And a friend of mine said, I don't know, try and come up with something unique to stand out. And the idea that I came up with was to quickly do a 2D animation in After Effects of me saying, hey, my name is Russ. And then sticking some stills of some of my portfolios, a little sampler in there and link to my portfolio, and sending a physical little flip book of each one of the frames printed out to the firm. And I had a friend of mine who says, that's too corny. That's weird. Don't send that. Don't do that. And I didn't. In that med tech company that I worked at, I remember talking with the CEO because it showed up on a Facebook memory or something like that when I made a little prototype of it. And I asked him, hey, if I would have sent you a little teeny flip book that said, hi, my name is Russ, and on the last page it says, we know you just flip through our portfolios anyway, this will make it faster, or something witty like that, would you have been interested in hiring me? And he answered saying, I would have hired you faster. And the lesson was, from my lesson from that experience was like, if you've got some fun idea and you think it's fun and that's the kind of place that you want to be, don't try and be like, oh, they're going to think that's corny and I don't want to send it out to there. If they think it's corny and they don't want that kind of a person to work for them, you don't want to work for that kind of a place either, because they're a bunch of stuffy turds that just have no personality and they want only a specific thing. You being yourself is going to help you find the place that's the right fit. So there you go.
Thank you.
Hey Russ, it's Sarah.
Hey.
Yeah.
I need to it's Sarah on the show again, folks. She used to come on all the time. I'd be like, it's Sarah back again? Yes. Anyhow, go ahead.
I would keep coming back. I'm just not getting any of the alerts. So it's like, how am I supposed to go?
It's because I'm a slacker and I've been trying to. Did you get my email blast where I said that we're replacing the sewage line in my house? So when I'm not working my day job, I'm digging a pit to fix my house. So it's been slow going.
I don't know why you haven't put me on it yet.
I don't know. You guys all go over to the variable.design and you can subscribe there and you'll get your email blasts. Anyhow, your question, Sarah, go ahead.
Yes, my question is, you were talking about how you've tried many different fields and many different sectors until you ended up reaching into medical. And where you're currently at, you're at True Anomaly. Is that correct?
Yeah, I am. That's a more recent thing.
How do you
What's your question about it?
Yeah, my question is not necessarily about True Anomaly, but more so like, how would you feel about going into a completely different sector currently, or are you happy with where you're at?
No, I like where I'm at. So it's interesting. I was working on my own. I got a job offering for a little just change in the economy. It was just slow. And so I worked at a media company for a small period of time. And then what's funny is the first guy that I ever did a freelance contract for after graduation, name was Abe Camacho. He had Satellite Industrial Design, a small studio in Phoenix. I did one contract for him at the very beginning of my career. We stayed in touch all these years later. He randomly calls me and says, hey, Russ, how would you like to work developing satellites in an aerospace defense company? And I'm like, that's pretty freaking sick. Tell me more. And next thing, one thing leads to another, and now I work. I'm helping. True Anomaly is designing and developing satellites to help maintain a sustainable space environment. Sustainable in their context means not because it's recyclable. Sustainable means like peaceful. So we're developing satellites that have way more tech in them because the existing ones are running off of tech from the 70s that we have for the US government. And so now we're making super satellites that can go really, really fast and track down bad guys. So it's super cool. I never in a million years would have thought, oh, hey, I get to help develop classified satellites and design the shell around them. So I've done that. But the reason I got this job was because I wasn't just an industrial designer. I forget what the acronym, military has an acronym for everything. Essentially, they needed animations that they could use to share the mission information with heads of state and whatnot, and brief people on, hey, this is what the plan is. And so they need animations for that. And so since I had background doing 3D animation and motion graphics and industrial design, they're like, yep, he's the guy. So in terms of I'm happy with it. Oh yeah, it's super cool. And it's kind of plays to that fact that I shared earlier of just saying yes and being open to it, because at this point in the game, nobody knows really what they think. And we had Joey Zeladon who came on and he swore he wanted to do shoes. And he did shoes for a while, and then he realized, man, I don't really want to do shoes anymore. And by being open, that led to new things, and now he does all kinds of different stuff. And same for me. So I've never regretted just taking an opportunity and running with it. And you never know. So just being open and saying, you know what, let's give it a shot. What's the worst that could happen? I go down this direction 10 yards and I go, absolutely not, and make a pivot and go back another way. That gives you the peace of mind as you go down this road, this direction. Well, I know that this has to be the right way for me, because that clearly wasn't, So hopefully that answers and addresses your question, Sarah, in a roundabout way.
Could you talk about like the accessories in your room or like the decor?
Definitely. So I worked at In-N-Out Burger when I was 16 years old, and that's where I ended up meeting my wife. We were absolutely not romantic way back then because I was just a young nerd and she didn't want to have anything to do with me. But I jokingly tell her, because that is the fact, we actually met and became friends because I worked at In-N-Out Burger. So that's where I got that sign, because it was by the dumpster. They were going to throw it away. And so I said, can I have it? And I built a sign out of it, put some lights in it. And I guess that's another piece of advice. Be a forever tinkerer, man. If you guys can just always be fidgeting and working on something, all the better. A, it gives you plenty to talk about when people ask. And then B, you never know when that job that you're looking into needs somebody who has experience with, like I did retail design, working with LED lights to light up and mock up specific retail space. So if you guys go into Home Depot in the paint and stain section, I did the early mock-ups for what's now in the aisles for Home Depot. So anyhow, I digress. Made a light, Home Depot, or sorry, In-N-Out Burger, Bob's Big Boy. When I was a kid, my granddad always said that I looked just like him. And so he's now long since passed. And kind of in his memory, anytime I go across a place and there's a Bob's Big Boy thing, I buy it compulsively and add it to my list. And I won a employee dress up contest, whatever, at the med tech firm I was at, because I actually sewed myself a Bob's Big Boy outfit. So if you go check out the Variable Design Instagram, it's probably on there still, the picture of me in the big boy outfit with my hair done up like that. And yeah, so who would have known? Oh, hey, do you know how to sew stuff? Well, yeah, because when I was a kid, I had 4 sisters and my mom would do stuff all the time. And so I learned how to sew. So I made myself a freaking costume. And that helped me with some med tech stuff too, because we were designing like wearables for, like, when you pretty much, it's like one of those ace bandage things that you put on your leg when you bust it. I helped design that, and you had to sew and put stuff together for it. And so anyhow, Yeah, so that's why that just explains my decor. I laser cut out my logo and put some lights behind it over there. But I think that's about it. And I do play the guitar. So yeah.
Hey, Matt here. Quick question for you about where do you pull inspiration from? What are your favorite avenues of inspiration in your work?
That's a great question. Um, I talked with one of my design director just the other day about that because I asked him like, do you ever like go on, Coralflot, or do you ever go on these ID websites and check out stuff? And he said, absolutely not. And I said, why? Why not? And he said, because there's a lot of people out there that do what I do, and there's a lot of them that are way better than I am. and so and so I feel bad about myself. And we even talked recently when Steve Cozzolino was on the show and kind of asked him, where he gets his inspiration from. Does he spend time looking at things? And his advice, his thoughts were not really, mostly because it's his mission as a company to be ahead of the trend. And so, which isn't to say that there's good in looking at Behance and scrolling through some of those sites to get the juices flowing. But most of the time, he says, I just get out. And so if you're working on consumer electronics and stuff, go and look where you see successful products. That's in retail spaces. It's not online, because you can make a mock-up and a rendering of whatever the hell you want online. And is that scalable, sellable, manufacturable? I don't know. But there's one place that you can always know it was manufacturable and makeable, by checking out places. So maybe it's cliche, maybe it's dumb, but just going to Best Buy, going to Target, and walking through those places and just getting excited about whatever you're working on. One of my other projects that I did that I just got so fixated on was I designed a baby bottle. I was ready to revolutionize the baby bottle industry, and I did more research, and my wife called me the weird guy in the baby aisle at Target because I would just pick up bottles and look at them. And she's like, that is just so strange. And then it turned out that all of the decisions that they made about design for bottles up to this point were for a reason, and a good one. And so I know that we're out to change the world, and we want to make drastic differences in our design work, but sometimes it's just like a little 10% difference that makes it just that much better, that puts you way above the pack. So looking at obviously nature for some people. I mean, I myself, I don't find myself being stuck on a design problem and running out to go fishing or something like that. I mean, they talk about the bullet train and the bird that splashes in the water. That's the clear example of biomimicry that always is referenced, and that's how they designed the nose of the bullet train. Great. I think that most of the time, whenever I've come across inspiration and stuff, it seems serendipitous and it seems like a stroke of luck. But as Scott Henderson would say, it's because what you need to do is you have to dedicate yourself to the struggle for a while, dedicate a few days of just really chewing on it and frustration, and suddenly you get put in what's called the flow state, and then it clicks, and what took you hours and hours and hours before to accomplish can be redone, because you're doing it the 10th time now or whatever, in a fraction of the time, and it's just way better because you've tapped into that. So that's my long-winded answer. I get my inspiration by going out and looking at places where they've succeeded before, talking with people, and then of course, once you've done that, going online to mostly for aesthetic, and just to get some ideas of like, ooh, this is kind of a neat feature. But truthfully, there's a ton of rounded, I call them bars of soap. You go on the ID websites, just everything's square with rounded edges and whatnot. Just go. There's bars of soap out on the internet aplenty. So if you want to see bars of soap, go ahead. But look elsewhere. And I think one thing that we need to do better about as industrial designers is to look in other cultures. There's beauty there. It doesn't need to be, just the stereotypical big name brands. There's beauty in tribal colors and in different CMF patterns and whatnot. We need to be able to fully embrace that and take a shift in that direction. Anyhow.
Thanks a ton for that. Hugely insightful and definitely a great thinking point for a lot of us here. I have another sort of follow-up question.
Definitely.
Are there any avenues of design or any industries that you have yet to touch that you would be tickled to try?
Oh man, that's a great question. So I've worked in multiple consulting firms, which has given me an opportunity to touch a lot of different things, ranging from ground coffee dispensers to oil. I forget what they called it, just the tap for big oil trucks when they're filling them up. They have this big dome to catch and prevent spills from happening, to anything and everything. Truthfully though, the one thing that I haven't done yet, that me being a dad of four, I think would be awesome. I've yet to fully jump in to developing kids products as a, hey, this is all we're doing is just, so for working for like Newell Brands or or Newbie or Boone or some of the other Graco, a company like that where you're just making kids products. um I think that would be a blast, mostly because it's super challenging. And having come from it's not as crazy as doing like a class 1 medical device, but like making kids products, there's lots of liability in that, so you have to have a lot of parameters that you're working around. And sometimes we want parameters to go away, but I tell you, like, sometimes having those things there, limits on what can be done. Here's this box, you have to design in the box. um Really can be, I don't know, for me it's exciting to say, oh, I have to figure out how to do this, and it can't weigh more than this, and it has to be big enough that a kid won't choke on it. Sweet. That's cool. And so that would be something that I'd love to do. But and I say that even still, I'm okay even if I never did full-time work in that sphere, only because I don't know, I've fully kind of embraced the what will happen, and if that path opens up for me, I'll take the opportunity. But truthfully, I think the itch that I want to really scratch someday, as I figure out the machine of how to get client, that's working for yourself as a freelancer. It's tough, but to be able to say that I have started off that way, built a design agency, and can staff people and regularly feed the machine, and be able to create award-winning work that's got my name behind it because it's my studio. Like, I think that's the career move that I'd someday like to be able to say that I've done that.
Loving it. Absolutely loving it. We've got a few more questions if you don't mind.
Yes, I love questions.
Right. Can you hear me? Probably not.
I hear you fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi Russell. My name's Hannah. I'm a
Hi, Hannah.
here at LTU, but I'm actually I grew up in Minneapolis.
Oh,
and
fun.
Yeah, I'm actually at a point where I'm looking at getting some internships back home. So I was wondering if you could speak more on if you have any specific advice for getting started in the Twin Cities specifically, or
Yeah.
you wish you knew when you first started.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Arizona. In fact, I now live in Arizona. I'm in Arizona now, but for 4 years I was in the Twin Cities. There's a lot of med tech there. Boston Scientific, Medtronic. So if that's a field that you're open to going into, let me know. I can obviously, that's another thing. By attending these things and connecting with the right people, that's how you get your jobs. most of the jobs that need to be filled aren't filled because you filled out a job application online. It's because, oh, I talked with Russ, who talked with Brian, who's the head director over this. Oh, we aren't really hiring. And that was a story I skipped. I got that med tech job because I connected with them. They weren't hiring. In fact, when I first talked with them, they said no. And then I talked with them again after sending them that infographic thing. And then they followed up with me with, well, maybe we should be hiring. And they made a job opening for me. So that being said, I'm more than happy if there's a connection at a company, if there's somebody on LinkedIn that you say, hey, Russ is connected with them or whatever, I'll at least fill you in on this is how I know them. More than happy to talk with them, point you in the right direction. I know in New York City right now, Steve Cozzolino, Cozzolino Studio is looking to hire an intern. So if you guys are looking at places and you're thinking about going to New York, that's a place to go. I know that Kablooey Design, where I first started off in medtech, their consultancy, they're always looking for interns and they regularly hire in the Twin Cities. There's another firm that's really awesome if you're into medtech, but they're also a consultancy, so they'll do anything and everything under the moon. It's called Primordial Soup. Pea Soup is the name of the company. There's an episode where I interviewed Matt Goulet, and he was featured, and that was in season 1. He's from Pea Soup. Target is there. They're awesome. And if you're into games and game making, trying to remember, man, is it Game Link? Anyhow, there's a whole game manufacturing company there, and I know Regalo Baby is in the Twin Cities as well. So if you're wanting to go into kid stuff, if you want to go into housewares, oh crud, what is the Nordic Wear? Nordic Wear is in the Twin Cities. They do pots, pans, cookie sheets, a lot of pressed metal products, housewares, whisks, anything kitchenware is in there. And there's a few other places. If you want to just work, I'll have to look up the name because I'm blanking on it. There's one specific ID firm there that their bread and butter is just sketch ideation. They do sketches, they'll mock it up and give renderings and poof, move on to the next one. So if you just love doing that, follow up with me and I'll gladly, I can't recall their name off the top of my head, but I know a number of people that have worked there. You'll work your butt off. You work super fast and sketch, make mock-ups, submit it, boom, next one. But that's what they do. That's all that they do. They don't do the other half of like, okay, now go model it. Let's go make it. Let's manufacture it. So as far as the Twin Cities go, I think that there's plenty of ample opportunity. There's a lot of competition to get into those places, but it's about just making connections. I think every freaking firm there has a Christmas party. So get your butt back home and look up where all of the Christmas parties are and just crash them and go introduce yourself, shake hands with people and build relationships and yeah, that's my suggestions in terms of the Twin Cities. Lots of stuff there. You just have to talk with the right people and let me know if you have anything specifically, because if I don't know, I've got lots of connections and they might be able to put you in the right direction.
Thank you so much. That was
No problem.
yeah, that was super helpful. Yeah, I'll reach out to you. Thank you.
No problem.
Gonna try to get in front here. Hi.
Hey, man.
Hi, my name is Ian. I'm a senior, and I really liked your answer about like expressing your personality in your like work and especially in your portfolio. Like the flipbook thing was super interesting to me. But
Yeah.
recently, obviously, you've worked in like medical technology and now like satellites and sort of like military stuff, right? Which are both
Yep.
kind of purposefully very impersonal design products, right? So how do you like bring that personality that you show in your like portfolio to your work?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So a big part of why you get hired at a specific firm is you. That's a big thing. Your work is great, but you've got to bring it. And so if you have the personality of a freaking fence post, nobody's going to want to work with you. And so if you're able to bring some personality to the table, quite frankly, like especially if you're working in satellites and in military, med tech, and whatnot. It can seem I can see where you get the impression that that's a pretty sterile, boring. Like here are the parameters. Form follows function. There's really not much that you can do with it as far as expression with your actual final deliverables. But I would argue that your personality comes through in so many different ways along the journey. And so bringing and showcasing your personality. So even if you were going into medical, studios are going to want to see your personality and the way that you present yourself in your work and the way that you interact, the way that you interview, because they've got to work with you every day. If you're going to spend more time with these people than you will with your own family sometimes. And so if you're just a total jerk, that's hard to work with because you've got it your way, and that's your way or the highway, then that's going to be tough. So if you can somehow, some way showcase, I know how to get it done. You know, I've got talent where it counts for sure. But when it boils down to it, I'm a fun loving person. I'm okay with chatting with you over by the water fountain or the coffee machine in the back. I love to, let's all go for a hike. Let's go do, let's do something and interact, because we can't always be working. Let's go play foosball. Like if you're a person who can show that you've got personality like that, that will move you to the top. You're like, okay, there's a bunch of engineers and they all graduated from Harvard or MIT, and then they all froze on their interview, but this guy was actually a blast and he had good grades. And when he sent me his resume, I was nicely formatted. There's lots of things that having that personality can help. But the one thing that I would suggest, having gone through this myself, I think I erred too much when I was first starting out to wanting to show my personality. There's a scaffolding standards of how do I say this? A good portfolio website looks good for a reason. And take time to look at, so if you want to work at Nike, look at the person who was just recently hired there on LinkedIn. Go look at their website. What did they use? Did they use Squarespace? Let's see, when I was graduating, I finally was looking at everybody's stuff and everybody was using freaking Squarespace. That's what it all looked like. The drag and drop Squarespace layouts that are just clean and simple. And I was hell bent on wanting to build something by myself, make it custom, totally Russ, just reek of Russ personality. And my stuff didn't look good. And what's funny is I didn't redo my form studies. My designs themselves didn't change at all, just how I presented them. And I followed the template of people that I saw that were getting hired. And suddenly people called me back and they wanted to interview me. So be careful not to get so caught up in, oh, I need to show my personality and that's what's going to help me stand out. Your personality is in the final result. Just you being you means that your design is going to be different than mine because we're different people. So don't sweat it too bad. Just be yourself. And I mentioned that before in terms of, show personality, mostly to just be like, don't try and, if you're a round personality, don't try and shove into a square hole because that's what you think you need to be at and whatever. Oh, they're going to be that way. I should try and be that way. Just be true to yourself. And if that doesn't work out, it's because you weren't the right fit for that place. But this place is going to love you. And as much as you wanted to work there, I've known a ton of designers that aspired to work at these big name companies. And then they get there and they said, it was terrible. I hated it because it wasn't a good fit. And now I'm at this little mom pop place that's a no name whatever company, but it's great. So, and then vice versa, somebody who had that corporate personality who tried going at a small place and it drove them absolutely bonkers, and so they went the other way and now they're happy. So be true to yourself and just let your personality shine through in your work and don't overthink it. You got it.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks a ton for that. At this point, does anyone else have a question they'd like to field?
I have two quick questions. I think they're
All
quick.
right.
Hi, I'm Kip. I'm a ID senior.
Sweet.
I guess first question is when you were working at MedTech, how did you guys go about like I guess user testing stuff to make sure things would actually work? And
Oh yeah.
so when since I'm assuming you didn't have like experience in the medical field like prior to that, was there a steep learning curve since like you're designing products that are like there's so much more safety and precaution involved rather than like a
Sure.
product you see on the shelf?
So just to give you context, the firm that I worked at had senior staff industrial designers who were good at doing human factors research, human factors engineering. And so doing human factors research, especially within the scope of med tech and getting FDA clearance is very meticulous, very strenuous. But there was somewhat of a learning curve, yeah, but I didn't need to be completely inundated with I didn't feel like I needed to go reach back for my anatomy and physiology books from freshman year of college or whatever. I didn't feel like I was screwed in that sense because teams know, they understand and know, hey, they're not coming from, they're not going to be, you can't throw them into a room full of doctors and have them just spout off whatever and they're going to get everything. Like, well, they understand that, and even doctors understand that, they have to be able to distill down what they're working towards in a way that's digestible for you as a designer. So to answer your question, they do human factors research, and so part of that they'll do formative and summative studies where they'll sit down and actually do tests with it. So that cassette thing with the handle that goes into it and the tip breaks off the anchor, um, it's that device is for, there's no nice way to say it. It's for vaginal prolapse surgery for old women who everything inside just isn't staying together the way that it needs to, well, the way it used to. And so they actually did cadaver labs where we 3D printed and made parts, and doctors would hold the tools, try and do everything, and on actual deceased body parts do mock surgeries. And so if you're interested in going into med tech, that was my first freaking project. It's like day one, and they had a plastic model of the women's sacral section, just spread eagle right there, right on the bench. And they just pulled back the cover and said, so we're putting you on this surgery project right here, and we're going to make a device so you can just go right on in here. And whatever, it was what it was. And it wasn't completely a deer in the headlights moment for me, but I was like, oh, we're just going to just throw me right on into this project. Great. And I think that's just a big part of it, being willing to just roll with it and being okay with saying, I'm not even going to pretend to understand everything that you said right there, but this is what I do understand. Having that transparency, and when you have senior design mentors who are going to be there on the project with you, nobody's going to throw you in on a project that needs to be full FDA cleared and whatever out the gate on your own. There's somebody who's going to be there holding your hand and leading you through it. I think that just the best mentality that you can have is being like, oh, okay, well, here's what it is. And don't be childish and snicker at the weird stuff that you're going to have to deal with. I mean, I had some strange, I never thought that I'd have to do anything in the adult world, but the firm took a job, and we'll just say all of my coworkers had a blast giving me a hard time with the models that had to be left on my desk to prototype with and whatnot to, anyhow, just take it a day at a time, and you're just like, okay, whatever. So as far as med tech, I wouldn't say I don't have a background in it, so I'm not interested. I'm not going to be able to excel. That's not the truth. It's approachable. It's very interesting. The stuff for FDA, there's consultants that help with that, specialists that help with that. You just have to be thorough and be willing to ask all kinds of questions and be okay with not knowing everything. And have a good sense of humor, because
For answering, that did not go where I was expecting, but I guess that's just part of it.
Yeah.
Russ, I want to say you have to lead with that story during the presentation.
Why I had just this. Yes. The project was to turn turning 10-second Tims into minute men. That's what through electrostimulation of some sort, with some patch that was supposed to help guys out who were struggling in performance. And for size and scale of this adhesive patch thing, the doctor thought it would be hilarious to give me a scale model he said the easiest thing, I'm just going to order something and send it to you. And he ordered it from some online adult thing. And so it was not to scale. The part that was important, whatever the hips and stuff, I guess. But yeah, so getting that salute as I'm walking to my desk was interesting. And everybody got a big chuckle. What are you working on over there, Russ? I'm like, ha ha. So yes, have a good sense of humor and just roll with it. And yeah, you'd be able to do just fine in medical. So question I have for all of you, who's the seniors? By raise of hands, who are the seniors? Okay. How many? Sarah, I already know your answer, so you can put your hand down. How many of you have recently reached out to a professional to connect and ask them about their experience in ID? There you go. Of course. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So this is my piece of advice for all of you as you're moving forward, juniors, seniors, sophomore. It doesn't really matter as you start this journey as a designer. My friends and I call it the Durango effect, because when he bought a Dodge Durango, before that he never saw one, and then suddenly those cars were everywhere because they were on his radar. Suddenly he noticed them before they were invisible. Don't be invisible. Don't be invisible. Be known. And so when I was first job hunting, and what turned the tide for me was when I stopped counting how many applications and how many studios I sent my stuff to in a cold email or whatever. When I stopped doing that and started counting how many interactions have I had with people in a day. So if you can reach out and connect with 10 people and have a genuine conversation with them, 5 to 10 every single day, that's when you're like heads down, really crunching to try and get a job, at least 10 real genuine connections daily. Point being, keep track of how many conversations you're having. I even had like a little moleskin black book, and I would write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I'd put little check boxes, and I'd write somebody's name, when I connected with them on LinkedIn, had a conversation with them and whatever, and check it off and try hard to get 10 a day. You will be blown away how things just kind of happen serendipitously when you just start connecting with people. Like, I've never actually physically met Sarah, but I know her because Justin Adliff was mentoring her. I don't know how the heck you met Justin, but what's funny is I've never met Justin Adliff in my entire life. And now he's a co-host that I'll have on my show. Andre Kotan went to ASU with me, so I know him and I've actually seen him in person. But, friendships and connections that have been made just completely 100% virtually. And I've never seen some of these people in person, but it was all because one person started one conversation with another. And Sarah extended this invitation to me because she happened to have participated and been on my show a few different times. And yeah, so just don't be invisible. And don't be scared to put yourself out there in any way that makes sense to you. If for you, your idea is, hey, I think I'm going to start a podcast and start a YouTube channel, and I'm going to try and do this, and we'll go live all the time, and we'll have corny music that will play all the time. And that worked for me. Do you, though, and try and figure out what's going to resonate with you in terms of putting yourself out there and stop being invisible, because we have a lot of invisible industrial designers out there, or at least ones that just occasionally put some cool rendering out in the stratosphere and they pretend like it only took them an hour, but we all know it took them 15 to do it. And then everybody thinks that that's the new standard. Like, No, put your real self out there. And I think Spencer Nugent from sketchaday.com would say the same thing. He found out what was going to work for him as far as putting himself out there and stuck with it, put his head down and stopped being invisible, and it's paid off.
Russ, thanks again for everything.
Yeah.
As an organization, the LTU IDSA chapter is a little on the young side, and every opportunity we have to meet people in industry and with personalities such as yours is a genuine joy. So,
Oh, thank you.
from everybody here, sincerely, thank you for your time.
Yeah, definitely. And I definitely expect a bunch of LinkedIn connection requests. Look for the one that has, so my work has requested that we have LinkedIn ones, but I've put a lot into building my personal brand. So I made another one that's got me on it. Look for the one that's the variable guy. When it's pointing, if it's the variable branded one, that's my ID one. And I'm more than happy to connect. And once we do, that gives you access to see all of my connections. And when you see all of my connections, you say, oh, I'd like to work at that place. Shoot, he was on Russ's show. That means they're probably buddies. Or if there's somebody that you want to come on the show, if you have ideas for the show, heck, tell me. And I wouldn't say that you have to go and subscribe to it on YouTube, but I wouldn't be hurt if all of a sudden I got a bunch of notifications saying bing, 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 subscribers on the channel. But honestly, I appreciate you. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk with all of you guys. My motto that I say from my show, The Variable, we are the variable, we are the good in the community. And I hope that I can instill that a little bit in you guys, that you can feel empowered, that you can make a difference by connecting with the right people. And I'm more than happy to see, I'd be tickled pink if somehow by connecting with somebody of you, some of you, it led to you getting your start in a long, fruitful career in industrial design, or if you go in some completely different path, but somehow by connecting with me, it pushed you in the right direction. I'd love to do that. Feel free anytime to reach out.